The rancher woke up and found a young Apache woman in his room. "I'll only stay one night." The rancher had lived on the edge of the desert for most of his life. His ranch was small but well kept, with wide fields for the cattle and a modest wooden house that had seen better days. The mornings were always quiet, except for the distant calls of birds or the low mooing of cows waiting to be fed. He liked the peace, but he liked the routine. Life on the ranch was hard, but it was honest. He had learned to rise before the sun, to work with his hands, and to find comfort in simple things like the warmth of a fire or the smell of fresh hay. That particular morning the air was crisp, carrying a faint scent of sagebrush from the nearby hills. The rancher had gone to bed late after mending a broken fence and making sure the cattle had enough water. He had been tired, his muscles sore from the hard work, but he felt a sense of satisfaction. This was the life he knew, the life he had chosen. He closed his eyes, expecting a night of quiet sleep. But he did not wake up to quiet. He woke up to a presence. At first, he thought he was dreaming. A shadow by the edge of the room, soft and still. Then his eyes focused, and he saw her. A young woman was sitting on a small chair near the window, her dark hair falling over her shoulders, her eyes calm but alert. She was quiet, yet there was a sense of purpose in the way she looked at him. She did not startle. She did not flinch, Britt. She simply waited. The rancher blinked, trying to shake the grogginess from his mind. Who are you?" he asked, his voice rough from sleep. The woman's lips curved into a faint smile. "I'm just passing through," she said softly. "I'll only stay one night." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made the rancher pause. He could see that she was serious. There was no malice in her eyes, only a quiet determination, desperate.
Yet the fact that a stranger had appeared in his room without warning unsettled him. He rubbed his eyes and sat up straighter, trying to make sense of the situation.
"One night?" he asked cautiously. "In my room?" How did you? But get in." She shook her head lightly. "It doesn't matter how I got here. I just need a place to rest. I promise I won't cause any trouble."
The rancher studied her.
She looked tired, her clothes dusty from travel, and there was a faint hint of sunburn on her skin. She seemed fragile, but not helpless. There was strength in the way she held herself, a quiet confidence that made him hesitate before reacting. He had grown up knowing the dangers of the desert, and he knew how unpredictable travelers could be. Yet, something about her seemed honest, genuine.
After a long pause, he nodded slowly.
"All right," he said, his voice still wary. "You can stay. But just for the night, like you said. And you eat with me at the table, not just take what you want." The woman's eyes brightened slightly. Though she did not speak, she simply nodded in return. There was a mutual understanding, fragile and tentative, but it was there.
He got out of bed and went to the kitchen, the wooden floor creaking under his feet.
He started a small fire in the stove and set a pot of water to boil. The morning sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, casting golden light across the room. The rancher worked quickly, preparing a simple breakfast. He cut slices of bread, laid out some cheese and dried meat, and poured a cup of hot tea. When he returned to the room, the woman was still sitting quietly. She watched him with calm curiosity, as if she were studying the rhythm of his life. The rancher felt a strange sense of connection even in this unexpected and awkward moment. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Eat something. You must be hungry." She moved gracefully to the chair and accepted the food without a word. The rancher poured himself a cup of tea and took a seat. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the clinking of dishes and the soft wind outside the window. Finally, the woman spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "You didn't have to let me stay, Bray. Most people would have called the authorities or chased me off." The rancher shrugged. "I've seen enough travelers out here to know when someone is just trying to survive. I've also seen enough trouble to know when to be careful. But, you seem different. I can't explain it, but something about you feels honest." She looked at him with a faint smile, one that carried both gratitude and understanding. "I only ask for one night," she repeated. "Tomorrow I will leave. I have my own path to follow." The rancher nodded, sensing the truth in her words. There was a quiet dignity in her tone, a respect for his space and his rules. Desk, he found himself intrigued, wondering about the life that had brought her here. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why now, in this quiet desert morning, had she chosen his ranch as her refuge?
After breakfast, he suggested she rest. "You can sleep on the sofa."
"I'll handle the chores. You need your strength if you're traveling alone." She accepted without protest and lay down, wrapping herself in a blanket he provided.
The rancher went outside, letting the morning light wash over him as he fed the cattle and checked the fences.
Desp. Every now and then he glanced toward the window, wondering what she might be thinking, what her story was. He remembered his own life, so full of routine and solitude. He had never imagined anyone would come into his quiet world so suddenly, yet there she was, a stranger, a reminder that life could change in an instant. He felt a strange sense of anticipation, a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. The hours passed slowly. The desert sun climbed higher, warming the earth and casting long shadows across the fields. The rancher finished his morning tasks and returned inside. The woman was still resting, her breathing steady and calm. Breath. He paused for a moment watching her, and realized that her presence, brief as it might be, had already left a mark on him. He decided to leave her to her rest, quietly preparing for the day ahead. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this one night would be different. Something about this encounter, this unexpected visit, carried a weight he couldn't yet understand. It was as if the desert itself had conspired to bring her to him, if only for a short time. And so the rancher went about his day, performing his chores, feeding the animals, and repairing fences. Yet, every sound, every movement reminded him that she was there, quietly resting in the room he had offered.
He wondered about her journey, her past, and the life that had led her to his doorstep.
As the sun began to set, casting orange and pink hues across the desert, he felt a strange mix of anticipation and unease. He did not know what the night would bring, only that his quiet life, so long untouched by others, had shifted in a way he could not yet comprehend. He returned to the house, prepared a small meal for her, and called her to eat. She came quietly, her presence calm, yet filled with an inner strength. They ate together as the evening shadows lengthened, the silence between them comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. For the first time in years, the rancher felt the stirrings of connection, a reminder that even in the solitude of the desert, life could surprise him. Night fell, and the desert became a world of quiet whispers and stars. The rancher returned to his room, glancing at the woman, who would only stay for one night. He realized that this brief encounter was already changing him, teaching him patience, empathy, and the quiet beauty of human connection. And so, the night began, with two strangers sharing a small room in a vast, lonely desert, each carrying stories of their past and the unspoken knowledge that this one night would leave a lasting mark on both of their lives. Brace. The next morning the rancher woke before the sun, as was his habit. The desert air was cool and still, carrying a faint scent of dust and sagebrush. As he stretched and rubbed his eyes, he remembered the young woman sleeping in the next room. She was still there, quiet and calm, as if she had always belonged to the space. The rancher hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should disturb her rest. Then he decided to start the day with his usual routine, knowing that she would wake in her own time. He stepped outside, feeling the soft crunch of dry earth beneath his boots. The sky was beginning to glow with the first hints of dawn, painting the desert in soft oranges and pinks. The cattle stirred in the fields, lowing softly, as though acknowledging the new day. The rancher went about feeding them, checking the fences, and making sure water troughs were full. Yet, despite the familiar tasks, his mind kept returning to the young woman. Who was she? Why had she chosen his ranch for shelter? And what had brought her through such a harsh, lonely land? When he returned to the house, she was already awake. She had risen quietly and was sitting at the small kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of water. The morning light fell across her face, highlighting her sharp cheekbones and the dark depth of her eyes. She looked at him with a quiet curiosity, as if she had been watching him from afar, trying to understand the rhythm of his life. Good morning," he said, his voice rough from sleep but steady.
Good morning, she replied softly.
Her voice was calm, yet there was a hint of strength beneath the gentleness. He gestured toward the food he had prepared.
I made breakfast. You should eat before you continue your journey.
You need your strength! She nodded and accepted the plate, her movements graceful and careful. They ate in silence at first. The only sounds, the clinking of utensils and the soft morning breeze rustling through the open window. After a while, she spoke. My name is Island, she said. I'm Apache. I was traveling with my family, but I got separated from them. I didn't know where to go, and I just needed a safe place for one night. The rancher listened carefully. He had heard stories of travelers facing hardship in the desert, of people lost and alone searching for a safe haven. Yet hearing her story directly, so calmly and sincerely, made it feel real, immediate, and human. I'm John, he said, nodding. I've lived here most of my life. The desert can be unforgiving, but you'll be safe here as long as you respect the rules. I don't usually have visitors, so this is unusual. Bray. Aylin smiled faintly. I understand.
I'm grateful that you let me stay. I only need a short time.
Tomorrow, I will leave and continue my journey. John studied her for a moment. Death. She seemed fragile, yet there was a quiet resilience about her, a strength born of experience and necessity. He wondered what her life had been like before she arrived at his doorstep. She had faced dangers, unknown paths, and challenges far beyond his understanding. Yet she carried herself with dignity and calm, as though she had learned to trust her own instincts. Tell me about your family, John said cautiously. If you feel like it, Britt. Sometimes sharing a story makes it easier to rest. Island hesitated, then nodded. My parents are gone. My older brother is leading our family now, and we were traveling together. We live far from here, in the mountains and plains where the land is wild. But I got separated from them during a journey. The desert. It is wide and lonely, and I didn't know where to go. I've traveled many miles on foot, and I was exhausted. That's why I came here. John felt a pang of empathy. He knew what it was like to face solitude, though his loneliness was by choice, not circumstance. He had lived alone for years, caring for his land and animals, breaths. Yet hearing her story made him realize how fragile life could be, and how much courage it took to move forward in the face of uncertainty. You have traveled far, he said.
And you walked alone? Yes, she said softly. But I have my own strength.
I've learned to survive. I've learned to keep moving, even when the path is uncertain. John nodded slowly. He respected her resilience, and he felt a growing admiration for her quiet courage. There was a lesson in her presence, something he hadn't thought about in years. It was not just about survival. It was about determination, hope, and trusting oneself even in the most difficult moments. After breakfast, John offered to show her around the ranch. He thought it might help her feel comfortable and give her a brief respite from her long journey. Breath. She accepted, and together they walked through the fields, tending to the cattle and checking fences. Aylin listened attentively as John explained the routines of the ranch, the care needed for the animals, and the harsh realities of desert life. She asked questions, not out of idle curiosity, but because she genuinely wanted to understand. As they worked, the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was filled with the unspoken understanding that both had lives shaped by struggle, by hard work, and by the quiet lessons of solitude. John noticed how she moved, confident in her steps despite the unfamiliar surroundings, and he felt a quiet sense of connection forming. When they paused by the water trough, Aylin spoke again. The desert is harsh, but it has its beauty. The silence, the wide sky. It reminds me of where I come from. Even though it is lonely, it feels honest. Real. John nodded.
He understood what she meant. He had always found comfort in the open land, the endless horizon, and the certainty of routine.
But her words made him see it differently, through the eyes of someone who had traveled far, faced hardship, and still found beauty in the world. As the day wore on, John prepared a small lunch for them to share under the shade of a tree. Drowned in despair, they ate quietly, occasionally exchanging stories about their lives. Aylin spoke of her childhood, her family, and the lessons she had learned about courage and patience. John shared stories of growing up on the ranch, of the hardships and joys of caring for the land and animals. Though their worlds were different, they found common ground in their respect for the natural world, the value of hard work, and the quiet strength it took to endure life's challenges. By afternoon, the sun hung high and hot in the sky. Aylin rested while John continued his chores, checking fences and mending broken gates. He found himself thinking about her journey, wondering about the miles she had traveled and the courage it had taken to reach him. Brief. He realized that her presence, brief though it might be, was changing his perception of life. It reminded him that there were other worlds beyond the ranch, other lives shaped by courage, hardship, and hope. When evening approached, John brought water for Aylin and prepared a simple dinner. They ate together again, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The desert became quiet, filled only with the calls of distant birds and the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. Aylin spoke softly as she ate. I won't stay long, but I will remember this place. Your kindness, it is rare. Many people would have turned me away.
But you didn't! You offered shelter, food, and respect!
That is more than many strangers would do. John felt a warmth in his chest. He had not expected gratitude, only a brief moment of human connection.
But her words touched him deeply.
He realized that even in the solitude of the desert, kindness could create bonds stronger than distance or circumstance. As night fell, Aylin prepared to rest again. John watched her, noticing the quiet strength in her movements, the calm determination in her eyes. He felt a sense of responsibility, not just for her safety, but for the trust she had placed in him. Brief. He realized that this single night, meant to be brief, had already left a lasting impression. He went outside to check the animals one last time, glancing at the stars as the desert stretched endlessly before him. The quiet night air carried a sense of possibility, a reminder that life could change in an instant, that strangers could become teachers, and that even brief encounters could leave lasting marks. Returning inside, John found Aylin resting, her presence calm and reassuring. He reflected on the day, on the stories they had shared, and on the lessons he had learned from her courage and resilience.
He realized that even though she would leave, she had already become a part of his life in a meaningful way.
And so, the night settled over the ranch, quiet and still, with two strangers bound by an unspoken understanding. Each had shared pieces of their past, their fears, and their hopes, and though the journey had only just begun, both knew that this one night together would leave a lasting mark on their lives. The next morning, the desert stretched endlessly under the soft glow of dawn. The rancher, John, woke with a familiar sense of routine, but also with a new awareness. Aylin was still there, patient. She had spent the night quietly, without a sound, as if she belonged in the small house that had once been just his. There was something in the way she moved, the calm confidence in her eyes, that made him pause and consider how much life had changed in just a short time. Aylin had risen earlier than usual. She stood by the window, watching the first rays of sun touch the horizon. The desert was quiet, peaceful, and wide. But there was also a sense of mystery in its vastness. She thought about her journey, about the miles she had traveled alone, and about the unexpected turn that had brought her to John's ranch. For the first time in days, she felt a small measure of restfulness. There was safety here, yes, but more than that, there was understanding, a feeling of being seen without judgment. John entered the room, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to her, and they drank in silence for a few moments, listening to the soft sounds of morning outside. Then he spoke, his voice careful, as if testing the waters of conversation.
"You slept well?" he asked.
Ray. Aylin nodded. "Better than I expected," she said softly. "I was worried when I arrived, but this place, it feels honest. It feels safe." John studied her quietly. He had always valued honesty above all else, in life and in work, and he realized that the way she spoke, calmly and sincerely, carried a rare kind of truth. "Good," he said. "You need strength for your journey. The desert doesn't forgive carelessness." She smiled faintly. "I've learned that." Her eyes shifted slightly, looking toward the window and the open land beyond. "I've learned a lot about survival, about being careful. But I've also learned about kindness. That's something I didn't expect to find here." John felt a warmth in his chest at her words. He had never considered himself particularly kind. He simply lived by principles, by the rhythm of the land, and by the respect he had for life. But hearing her perspective made him see that simple actions could carry weight beyond measure.
After breakfast, John suggested they go outside.
The sun was already climbing, and the ranch demanded attention. He wanted Aylin to see more than just the small house. He wanted her to understand the life he had built and the care it required. Race. She agreed, and together they stepped into the early morning light. Aylin followed him through the fields, observing the cattle grazing calmly and the fences standing strong. She asked questions about the animals, about the work required to maintain the ranch, and about the land itself. John answered patiently, explaining everything in detail. Then, she listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and making careful observations. It was not idle curiosity. She genuinely wanted to understand the world he lived in, and he found her attention both refreshing and respectful. At one point, they stopped near a small creek that cut through the ranch. The water was shallow but clear, reflecting the sky above. John knelt to inspect a broken fence post while Aylin sat on a nearby rock, watching him work. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with the quiet rhythm of labor and the shared understanding that both were committed to their respective paths.
Breaths.
You're very patient with your work, she said softly. I can see that you care about every detail.
The animals, the land, it all matters to you. John straightened and wiped his hands on his pants. Grasp. It has to matter. Everything here depends on balance. The cattle, the land, the fences, they all rely on each other. Life is like that, isn't it? Each action has consequences. Island nodded.
Yes,
I've seen that too. In my travels, every choice matters.
One wrong step, and it can change everything.
Her gaze lingered on the creek, thoughtful. It makes me appreciate the careful ways of life, the small decisions that keep things steady.
They worked side by side through the morning, repairing fences, checking the water troughs, and feeding a few stray calves. Island moved with grace, learning quickly and helping without complaint. John noticed how naturally she adapted to the ranch, despite having come from a very different life. There was a quiet strength in her that reminded him of his younger days, before life had taught him patience and resilience through solitude. During a short break, they sat under the shade of a large mesquite tree, sharing water and a simple meal. The desert air was hot now, but the shade offered a small refuge. Island spoke of her childhood, of the lessons her parents had taught her, and of the journey she had undertaken with her family. John listened, fascinated.
Her stories were filled with courage and determination, but also with moments of simplicity and joy.
He realized that her experiences, though very different from his own, had shaped her into a person both strong and thoughtful.
You faced a lot, he said gently. It's amazing how you keep going. Island looked at him, her eyes steady. I have to. Life doesn't wait for anyone. But I've learned to take it one step at a time. That's why I travel carefully, why I respect the land, and why I listen to people like you.
Paying.
There is wisdom in paying attention. John nodded, impressed by her insight.
He had spent years learning the ways of the desert and the ranch, but her words reminded him that there were lessons still to be learned, from people, from travel, and from the quiet observations of the world around him. As the day progressed, they returned to the house to rest. The heat of the afternoon made work difficult, but it also offered a time for reflection. Aylin rested on the sofa while John continued his chores inside, preparing a small meal for the evening. The house was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the desert wind through the windows. When evening came, the desert was bathed in golden light, casting long shadows across the land. John called Aylin to dinner, and they ate together, the conversation flowing naturally now. They spoke of small things, the patterns of the clouds, the colors of the sunset, the ways animals moved across the fields. Yet beneath the surface there was a deeper understanding forming, a bond of mutual respect and unspoken trust.
You've given me more than shelter, Island said quietly. You've given me kindness and a chance to rest without fear.
That matters more than I can say. John felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. He had always believed in the value of work, of honesty, and of simple living, but her words made him realize that human connection carried its own weight, its own importance. Even brief encounters could change a person, and he understood now that this one night and the day that followed was already shaping both of their lives in small but meaningful ways. After dinner, they stepped outside to watch the stars. The desert sky was vast and clear, filled with millions of points of light. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional call of a distant animal or the rustle of leaves.
John pointed out constellations, explaining their names and the stories behind them.
Island listened intently, absorbing the quiet beauty of the night and the knowledge he shared.
It's beautiful, she said softly. The sky feels endless here. It makes you feel small, but also part of something bigger.
John smiled. That's why I stay.
The land, the animals, the sky, it keeps you grounded. It reminds you of your place in the world and the value of the life you live. Aelin nodded, her gaze moving from the stars to the horizon.
I will remember this place, she said quietly.
Even after I leave, it will stay with me. Your kindness, your patience, the way you care for everything, it will stay with me. John felt a warmth he hadn't expected. He had lived a quiet, solitary life for years, and yet this brief encounter, this single day spent together, had left a mark on him. He realized that life's beauty often came in unexpected forms, through strangers, through small gestures, and through moments of shared understanding. As the night deepened, they returned to the house. Balin prepared to rest again, while John took a moment to reflect on the day. He thought about her journey, her courage, and the lessons she had brought into his life, simply by being present. He understood that even though she would leave soon, their time together would remain, a reminder of connection, resilience, and the quiet power of kindness.
And so the night settled over the ranch, with two strangers sharing the small space of a house in the wide, lonely desert.
Each carried their own past, their own struggles, and their own hopes. Yet, through conversation, shared work, and quiet understanding, a bond had begun to form. It was a bond of respect, of curiosity, and of a growing sense of shared humanity, a bond that would remain with them both long after the desert swallowed the last traces of their brief encounter. The morning sun broke slowly over the desert, painting the wide landscape in soft shades of gold and orange. John the rancher awoke as usual before dawn, but today there was a weight to the air he couldn't ignore. Aelin would be leaving soon. The thought made him uneasy. He had grown accustomed to her quiet presence, to the soft rhythm of her movements, and to the conversations they had shared. Though brief, their time together had formed a bond neither had expected. Aelin was already awake, sitting quietly near the window with a small cup of water. She watched the desert stretching endlessly before her, her dark eyes calm but reflective. There was a gentleness about her now that had not been there on the first day, a quiet acceptance of the connection that had formed between them. Though she had promised to stay only one night, the time they had shared had left both of them changed. John approached her with 2 cups of tea, the aroma warm and comforting. He handed one to her and took a seat nearby. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the silence filled with unspoken words.
"You'll be leaving soon," John said finally, his voice quiet.
"I hope the journey isn't too hard." Aelin nodded. "It's the path I must take. I promised myself one night here, and I must honor that. But I will miss this place, and your kindness." Breaths. John felt a tug at his chest. It was strange how someone could arrive so suddenly and yet leave such a lasting mark. He had lived a solitary life for years, and yet her presence had brought warmth, curiosity, and a sense of shared humanity that he had long forgotten. "Do you want breakfast before you leave?" he asked, though the words felt heavy with unspoken emotion. Breath. She smiled faintly.
"I would like that." He prepared a simple breakfast, their movements quiet and respectful.
They ate together, speaking little, each savoring the moments before the inevitable farewell. John observed Aelin closely, the way her hands moved, the small expressions on her face, the calm dignity she carried even in a moment that was bittersweet, realized that he would remember these details long after she had gone, etched into his mind like a memory he would treasure.
After breakfast, John suggested they walk one last time through the ranch.
The sun was higher now, casting warm light across the fields and animals. The desert was alive with sound, the low hum of insects, the distant calls of birds, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. Aelin followed him, her steps light and deliberate, her eyes taking in the land with a mixture of appreciation and reflection. "This place is beautiful," she said softly. "The land, the animals, the quiet. It's peaceful in a way that feels rare. I will remember it always." John nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Brace. It's a hard life, but it's honest. You've seen that, even in just a short time." Eileen looked at him, her gaze steady. "I have, and I've learned something from you. About patience, about care, about respect. Not just for the land, but for the people we meet, even briefly. You've shown me that." John swallowed hard. He realized that their time together had not only given her rest and safety, but had also reminded him of lessons he had known but sometimes forgotten. The importance of kindness, the value of connection, and the quiet power of shared understanding. They walked through the fields, checking the fences and feeding a few of the cattle together. The routine work, which had felt ordinary before, now carried a new meaning. It was a way to share life, to offer trust, and to build a connection even in a short span of time.
Eileen moved with confidence, helping without being asked, learning quickly, and showing a respect for the land that made John admire her even more.
As they paused by the creek, Eileen sat on a rock and watched the water flow. She seemed lost in thought, reflecting on her journey, the life she had led, and the unexpected turn that had brought her here. John sat beside her, giving her space but staying close enough to share the quiet moment. "Do you ever get lonely here?" she asked after a while, her voice soft. John considered her question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I've grown used to it. The work keeps me busy and the land keeps me grounded. But it's not the same as having someone to share it with."
Eileen nodded slowly. "I understand.
By now.
I've traveled alone for much of my life, and it can be both freeing and difficult. You learn a lot about yourself, but you also feel the weight of solitude."
John glanced at her. "You've carried a lot with you, haven't you?" "Yes," she said quietly. "But I've also learned to carry it with strength. I've learned to walk forward even when the path is uncertain. And I've learned that moments of kindness, even brief ones, can leave a lasting mark." He felt a deep sense of admiration for her. She had traveled far, faced danger, and yet maintained her dignity and grace. Her presence had brought lessons of resilience, patience, and understanding into his quiet life. He realized that even brief encounters could shape the heart and mind in ways that lasted a lifetime. As the sun climbed higher, John returned to the house to prepare a small bag for her journey. He packed water, dried meat, and some bread, enough to sustain her for the day. He handed it to Eileen, who accepted it with gratitude and a quiet smile. "I don't know if I'll see you again," John said softly, "but I hope your journey is safe." Eileen's eyes met his. Breaths.
Thank you, she said, for everything.
"Your kindness. It will stay with me, and I hope that one day our paths might cross again, even if by chance." Breath. There was a pause, a moment suspended in time, where neither spoke. The desert stretched endlessly around them, vast and quiet, as if holding its breath. Then, with a gentle nod, Eileen turned and began walking toward the path that led away from the ranch. Her steps were deliberate, steady, and filled with the quiet confidence that had carried her through so many challenges. John watched her go, feeling a mixture of sadness and gratitude. He realized that her visit, brief as it had been, had opened a door in his heart. It had reminded him of the importance of connection, of trust, and of the lessons that could be learned from even the shortest encounters. He stood at the edge of the field watching her disappear into the distance, her figure gradually becoming smaller against the vast expanse of the desert. The wind carried the faint sound of her movements, the soft rustle of clothing against the dry earth, and then silence. Returning to the ranch, John felt a profound sense of reflection. Life would continue as it always had, with chores, animals, and the rhythm of the land, but something had changed within him. Island's presence had reminded him of courage, resilience, and the quiet beauty of human kindness. It was a reminder that even brief moments shared with someone who carries strength and integrity can leave a lasting mark. He walked through the house, now quiet without her, and took a deep breath. The memories of their conversations, the shared labor, and the simple moments of connection filled the rooms. He thought about her words, her calm presence, and the dignity with which she had approached life and her journey. He realized that even though she was gone, the lessons she had imparted would remain with him forever. That night, John sat by the window looking out at the desert sky. The stars were bright, endless, and beautiful. He thought about Island, about the courage she had shown, and about the bond they had formed in such a short time. Though she had only stayed one night, her presence had reshaped his understanding of kindness, trust, and connection. And so, the desert night stretched over the ranch, quiet and serene, filled with the knowledge that life was made richer not by the length of encounters, but by the depth of understanding, the strength of character, and the courage to reach out, even for a brief moment. John knew that he would remember this day and this young woman for the rest of his life. The morning after Aylin left, John woke to the familiar sounds of the desert, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds, and the low hum of the cattle grazing in the fields. Yet something felt different. The house was quieter, emptier, and though he had expected her departure, the absence of her presence weighed heavily on him. He had grown used to the soft rhythm of her movements, the quiet conversations, and the small gestures that had made the house feel warmer than it ever had before. He rose from his bed and moved through the rooms slowly, noticing the small traces of her presence. The empty cup she had left on the kitchen table, the blanket folded neatly on the sofa, and the faint scent of her that lingered in the air. These small reminders brought a mixture of warmth and sadness. He realized how quickly someone could become part of life, even in the span of just a day and a night. As he stepped outside, the desert air was crisp and fresh. The sun was beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the ranch and painting the land in shades of gold and pink. The familiar routine of chores awaited him, feeding the cattle, checking fences, and repairing broken gates. But each task felt different now. Every sound, every movement carried a reminder of Island, of her courage, her quiet strength, and the bond they had shared. John paused by the fence, leaning on the wooden post as he gazed across the fields. He thought about her journey, about the miles she had traveled alone, and the hardships she had endured. He marveled at her resilience, the way she carried herself with dignity and determination, even in the face of uncertainty. Her presence had been brief, yet it had left an indelible mark on his heart. He returned to the house and made himself a cup of tea, sitting by the window and looking out at the vast expanse of desert. The land seemed the same, yet he knew he had changed. Life on the ranch had always been predictable, filled with routine and quiet labor, but Island's visit had introduced something new, an awareness of the unexpected, a recognition that even brief encounters could bring lessons, insights, and a renewed appreciation for life. Throughout the day, John carried on with his chores, but he found himself reflecting on the conversations they had shared. He remembered the way she had spoken of her family, her travels, and the lessons she had learned about resilience, patience, and trust. He thought about the quiet moments under the mesquite tree, the shared meals, and the walks across the fields. Each memory was vivid, a reminder of the connection they had formed, brief though it had been. As the afternoon sun climbed high in the sky, John paused by the water trough, watching the cattle drink and the small birds flutter nearby. He realized that life on the ranch, though often solitary, had become richer in his own mind because of her presence. He had seen the world through her eyes, if only for a short time, and it had reminded him of the importance of empathy, kindness, and understanding. The desert was still vast and quiet, but now it seemed full of possibility, full of lessons waiting to be noticed. That evening, John prepared a simple dinner and sat alone at the table, thinking about what had transpired. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for having met Island, but for the reminder that life could surprise him, that connections could form in unexpected ways, and that the briefest encounters could leave lasting impressions. He thought about the words she had spoken, about her strength and courage, and about the way she had carried herself with dignity even in the face of uncertainty.
As night fell, the desert transformed into a quiet, star-filled expanse.
John stepped outside to look at the sky, the same sky he and Island had admired together. The stars stretched endlessly above him, brilliant and unchanging. Yet the memory of her presence made him feel both humbled and inspired. He realized that even though she was gone, her influence remained. The lessons she had imparted about resilience, kindness, and the value of connection were now a part of him, woven into the fabric of his daily life. He thought about how fleeting moments could hold profound meaning. Aylin had come into his life for just one night, yet she had transformed his understanding of solitude, work, and human connection. He realized that life was not measured solely by years or by the routine of daily existence, but by the depth of experiences and the quality of interactions with others. Her visit had reminded him of the beauty in small gestures, the power of listening, and the courage it took to face life's challenges with grace.
Over the next few days, John returned fully to his routine on the ranch.
He tended the cattle, repaired fences, and worked the land as he had always done. Yet everything felt a little brighter, a little more meaningful. He carried with him the awareness of Island's journey, the lessons she had shared, and the reminder that life's paths often intersect in unexpected ways. Even in solitude, he felt connected to the land, to the animals, and to the memory of the young woman who had walked briefly into his life. He began to notice things he had once taken for granted, the way the wind moved across the plains, the patterns of clouds in the sky, the soft calls of birds in the distance. He found joy in small details, in moments of quiet observation, and in the simple act of being present. Pylon had shown him that attention and care could transform even ordinary life into something rich and meaningful. Weeks passed, yet John still thought of her, wondered where she was, how her journey continued, and whether she carried the memory of the ranch and their brief time together as he did. Though he knew he might never see her again, he found comfort in the knowledge that their encounter had mattered, that even a single night could leave an imprint on a life, shaping thoughts, feelings, and perspectives in ways that endured. One evening, as the sun set over the desert, John walked to the edge of the field and looked out at the horizon. He imagined Island traveling across the land, carrying her strength, her dignity, and her courage with her. He felt a sense of pride and gratitude for having met her, for having shared a moment of trust and connection, and for having learned lessons that would stay with him forever. He realized that life's meaning was not found solely in the routine of work or in the predictability of solitude, but in the relationships we form, the moments we share, and the courage we find in others. Pylon had reminded him of that, and though she had left, her influence was permanent. That night, as John lay in bed, he thought about the desert, the stars, and the vast open sky. He reflected on the lessons of patience, resilience, and kindness. He understood that even brief encounters could leave lasting impressions, and that every moment of genuine connection mattered. The ranch was quiet, as it always had been, but in his heart, something had changed forever. In the days that followed, John continued his work with renewed perspective.
Despre.
He approached his life with a greater awareness of the value of connection, the importance of kindness, and the beauty of shared experiences. No matter how brief, he treated each day as a gift, each task as meaningful, and each encounter as an opportunity to learn and grow.
Though Aelin was gone, her presence remained in the memory of shared meals, the quiet walks across the fields, and the conversations that had opened his mind and heart. He realized that even a single night could change a life, leaving lessons and memories that endure far beyond the moment itself. John understood now that life's richness was measured not by the number of years or the routine of work, but by the depth of human experience and the quality of connections we make. Aelin had shown him that courage, dignity, and kindness were gifts that could shape lives, even in the briefest encounters. And so, life on the ranch continued, as it always had, with the same sunrises, the same chores, and the same rhythms of nature. Yet John knew that something fundamental had shifted within him. The lessons he had learned, the bond he had shared with Aelin, and the memory of her courage and grace would remain with him forever, quietly guiding his thoughts, actions, and perspective. The desert remained wide and quiet, filled with its endless sky and infinite possibilities. And in that vastness, John carried with him the knowledge that even a single night, shared with the right person, could illuminate life in ways that endure, inspire, and transform forever.